So welcome, as you can see, we're here in the Buddhist library graveyard. One of the things I often do actually is take groups into cemeteries, such as Rookwood Necropolis. Have any of you been to Rookwood Necropolis,
Yeah.
the largest still functioning cemetery in Australia? It's wonderful, isn't it? All those gravestones. That's why you see a few kind of like Christian-inspired themes here. It's got that beautiful, elegant decay. All the statues starting to fall over. Everything's overgrown, and there's a lot of moss and cracks, and you get this real sense of, age, a sense of time moving. Next time, perhaps we'll do it up the road at Newtown Cemetery. But winter time, night time, all of that, we thought, okay, next best thing, make a few cardboard graves, right? And so I wonder if you know that this contemplation of death, this is not something I've invented. It's not something new. It's something that the Buddha recommended over and over and over again. He recommended going to a charnel ground. Do you know what a charnel ground is? It's kind of like a cemetery, but without the coffins and without putting them in the ground. Charnel ground basically is where you just go and you throw a corpse and you just let it decay, let it decompose. It's quite a visceral image, right? No burning. Burning bodies would have been quite an expensive thing, is quite an expensive thing still today. You need to have the resources, you need to have the money. And so at the time of the Buddha, they just used to throw bodies into the charnel ground and let the animals and the elements have their way with them. And he would encourage monks and nuns to go and sit for meditation in the charnel ground. Why? Why would we want to contemplate death? What is the purpose? I mean, for me, sure, I'm just, an old, maybe 30 years ago, slightly goth, more than that, 40 years ago, slightly goth, interested in black clothing and hanging out in cemeteries and depressing music, right? So maybe that's why I'm here. Why are you here? Why did the Buddha recommend doing death contemplation? Any ideas?
Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
Non-attachment to pain and suffering.
To pain and suffering. Because if you think about...
We all have pain and suffering every day.
Yep.
And sometimes you get to a point where you can actually enjoy it because it's not so important that you have a perfect body that's working perfectly. Your pain is there to say, well, get on with it.
The right amount of pain will tell you to get on with it. The wrong amount of pain will want you to finish it. There's some illnesses out there that are incredibly painful, and death is incredibly painful. What were you going to say?
To raise spiritual urgency.
To raise spiritual urgency. Yes, that's a good one. Yes. Anyone else? Yeah. No wrong answers.
Live life purposefully.
To live life purposefully. Yeah, I think that's probably a good one, right? Sure, it helps us deal with things like the body. We see what the body is, right? It's this changing thing that only goes one way. Looking around the room, most of us are starting to appreciate that, right? Not going to get any better from here. It's just going to get harder and harder, worse and worse, and more painful and more difficult. That's what's going to happen with your body. And so, yes, death contemplation is designed to really make it real. You go to a charnel ground, you can't pretend death isn't going to happen. You can't pretend it's not going to happen to you. You see it very clearly. And that's an important thing, because most of the time, our culture, our society, we don't think about death. And this is how it's been in many cultures, in many ages throughout history. We like to pretend it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen to me. Somehow I'm going to miraculously escape the clutches of death. Might happen to other people, but it's not something that happens to me. And think about things like our culture. We don't talk about death. Shh, don't talk about that. We don't want to invite death. Death's always there, just lurking, right? Always there, just lurking. How many people do you think died in Australia today? How many is lots?
Didn't count them.
Not 1,000, no. 131 or so people died today in Australia. It doesn't sound like a lot, does it? And I think 40,000 people die per year. That wasn't, you should check my numbers. I'm not regular numbers. But one of them was a friend of mine who passed today. And I mentioned this to my teacher, Bhante Akaliko. I said, I'm not going to be able to meet you tomorrow. I'm going to have to go and be with some people who have who've lost someone. He said, it's just relentless, isn't it? The whole thing. You know, this whole business of death that is just relentless. It just goes on and on. There's always people dying. As a Buddhist monk, you get to see this quite a lot, actually, because when people die, they come to the monks because they want to acknowledge this passing, this moment in someone's life, which now has ended, and we are left to understand it. We are left to ask those questions of, what does my life mean? What is the point of my life? How am I living my life? And so death contemplation is a very good tool for us to encourage us to really reflect upon how we are living our life. What are we doing with the time that remains? Because we understand death could come at any moment. How have I been living? It's this illusion that death won't come that makes us very lazy, very blasé, very boring people. we can only be boring if we kind of have this conceit that I'll be here tomorrow, right? I'll be here next week, next year. I'll do that later, that thing. Save my meditation for another time. I'll put off my spiritual learnings until I finish with my job and my family. When I'm old, I'll do that. Of course, time of death is very uncertain. And so that's that urgency that Mu mentioned. There's that urgency, there's that moral question of how we're living our life, and then there's that very, very much a bodily approach to understanding the process of being born, living life, and dying. So tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to do a contemplation on a decaying corpse. Yay! It's quite a heavy thing to do, right? On a Tuesday night. We're not even halfway through the week. So usually when you come to a Buddhist event, you have a little chat about meditation, then you do the meditation, then you have a little Dharma talk afterwards, a question and answer to finish, right? We're going to save the meditation until towards the end of tonight's workshop. The reason is we need to do some scaffolding. We need to do some getting into the zone in a way that's not going to cause people to freak out and to not want to come back to the Buddhist library. So we're going to kind of gently make our way towards the actual cemetery contemplation. And so to begin with, we're here in this place. We've come here to this cemetery, right? And when I take groups into the cemeteries, it's very instructive. One of the things I do is I say, see if you can find your name. See if you can find someone who has died at the age that you are now. See if you can discover some of the reasons people died. Oh, gravestones, you have all this information, right? It's quite a lot of information you get. You get their name, you get the years they lived and the age they died. When you go to old cemeteries, most of us would already have been dead. They didn't live that long. And so you also see things like little babies who just lived maybe a couple of hours or a day, or 2 days, or a week, or 2 months, or kids who died at 7, 9. You realize, actually, I'm doing pretty good. I'm on a pretty good wicket. People dying at 40, 45. You know, most of us here are older than that. We're long in the tooth. Yeah. And then you think about someone like Mozart or other various geniuses throughout history and how much they achieved, before they turned 30, and you think, what am I doing with my life? So you've got that. Sometimes it will tell you how they died. Hit by a tram, one of my favorites at Rookwood, hit by a tram, died of tropical diseases. So these gravestones, they actually give you a lot of information. Sometimes there'll be something like, dearly beloved, will be missed, a champion of charity, community leader. These are things that people wanted to remember about the deceased, wanted other people to know. So maybe later we'll get the opportunity to write our own epitaph, and you might think about what it is that you'd like to be remembered for. We'll do that later. But this is the kind of stuff that helps us appreciate other people around us have died. When you go to the graveyard, everyone hopefully in that graveyard is dead. The people who loved them mostly are also dead. The people who cared for those graves, and think of an old grave like at Brookwood or up here at St. Stephen's Church, they're gone too. People who made the gravestones, the people who carried the coffin, they're all gone, right? We have to confront this universal truth that death is certain. Death is certain. It is inevitable. And we know this. We know this, right? We know we're going to die. And yet, we don't fully appreciate just what that means. If we did fully appreciate it, probably our lives would look very different. The way you live, your interactions with others, the things you do with your time, the approach to the spiritual path, fights with friends, these things would look very different. If you knew that you were going to die the next day, you wouldn't want to leave a good friend with a fight, right? You'd want to mend that relationship. You'd want to kiss your partner goodbye that morning. You wouldn't want to go to bed angry. You'd want to tell people to be peaceful and calm and kind and gentle, right? Death is coming. So in the face of death, it changes the way we view our life. And that's why if we really understood death, our life, our practice would be very different. There's a great Tibetan teacher, Indian, but a huge influence on Tibetan Buddhism, Atisha. He said that if you don't have an awareness of death, then your spiritual practice lacks energy, lacks vitality. And I think that's true. And perhaps it's for that reason that the Buddha frequently taught Maranasati, mindfulness of death. Mara is death. Sati, mindfulness. Maranasati, mindfulness of death. And so this is what we're developing. This is what we develop when we go to something like the cemetery. We start to develop this awareness, this mindfulness of death. We find it in the early Buddhist texts, the suttas, the teachings of the Buddha. There's a couple of texts called Maranasati in the Anguttara Nikaya 7s. In the first one, the Buddha is hanging out with a bunch of monks, and he says, if you practice mindfulness of death, it's very beneficial. It's very conducive. It'll take you all the way on the spiritual path. And the monks are like, oh, yes, yes, yes. And the Buddha's like, but do you practice mindfulness of death? And they're like, oh, yes. One of the monks says, I practice mindfulness of death, thinking, if only I live another day and night, then I'll pay attention to the Buddha's teachings and I'll learn a lot. And another monk says, well, they're a bit competitive. Well, I will practice mindfulness of death just for one night, and I'll think about the Buddha's teachings and I'll make a lot of progress. Another monk says, well, I practice mindfulness of death just for half a day. Next one says, I'll practice mindfulness of death just for the amount of time it takes me to eat a meal. Oh, I'll practice mindfulness of death just as long as it takes me to eat 4 or 5 mouthfuls. I practice mindfulness of death just as long as it takes me to eat 1 mouthful. And the Buddha's like, okay, what about you? And this monk says, well, I practice mindfulness of death just as long as it takes me to breathe in and out. Because that's all that you've got, right? That's all that's certain, is that last breath in, that last breath out that you just took. You don't know, are you going to breathe in again? One day, that's how it's going to be. You'll breathe in, you breathe out, and you'll never breathe in again. And the Buddha says, yes, that's the right spirit. Or eating just 1 mouthful of food. If you can maintain an awareness of death, even for just 1 mouthful of food or 1 breath in, then this, he says, will be of great benefit to you. And this sort of teaches us just how difficult it is to maintain that awareness. Oh yeah, you maintain awareness of death for a whole night and a day? Not likely. Even when I take groups into the cemetery, everyone begins like very hush, hush, very mindful. We point out the graves. everyone's going to die. 5 minutes later, people are just strolling along talking about their plans for tomorrow. We've forgotten, even in that workshop, all about death, we've forgotten. And it doesn't mean we need to be like neurotic and like fixated. It just means that this is something that we should bear in mind. Because it'll change your life. And another sutta, the one that follows, also a sutta called the Maranasati Sutta, is where a monk is encouraged to reflect at the end of every day, going to bed. I could get bitten by a snake or a scorpion or a centipede. I could stumble and fall off a cliff. I could get food poisoning. I could get attacked. And if these things happened, it would be very difficult to practice. And so they think like this kind of urgency, like, okay, any moment I could die. Even just before, when our friend was introducing the housekeeping things, there's only one exit over there, you know? And what we're thinking of is danger, yeah? Fire, potential. It's like a anxious person's encyclopedia, right? Anything could happen. I asked you before, how do you want to die? Think you get a choice? Not usually. You know, you could die in so many different ways. There are many, many, many ways to die. And some of them are spectacular. Some of them are horrible. The point is, there are many ways to die. There's not many ways to stay alive. And so this monk is there in his bed thinking like this, oh, you know, tomorrow, tonight even, I might not even survive tonight. Some of you might not even survive tonight. Sobering, isn't it? Yeah. And so the monk thinks to himself, do I have any unskillful, unwholesome, unbeneficial qualities in myself? This is like a evening examination of where you're at. You reflect, did I use my speech badly today? Did I hurt someone? Did I kill something today? You know, did I steal? Was I a horrible person today? And if you can see that you've got some work to do, then the instruction from the Buddha is, well, knowing that you could die at any moment by snake bite, scorpion, falling off a cliff, food poisoning, attacks, knowing this, then you should rouse up energy to practice, to purify your mind, so that the next night, when it comes to that looking over your life, your activities of the day, you see some sort of improvement in your mind. And this urgency, we call this samvega, this spiritual urgency, is extremely important to propel us along the spiritual path. Otherwise, our inclination is to forget that we could die at any moment from snake bite, from scorpions, from falling off a cliff, from food poisoning, from attacks or whatever. We'll forget this. And forgetting, we become lazy. We lose our direction. We lose our momentum. And then when we die, we're unprepared. We haven't lived a good life. We're not ready to go. We have regrets. We have unfinished business. We hold on. We can't let go. We suffer in our final moments. So even in the short time that we've been sitting here, your life expectancy has been diminishing. It's only going to go one way. What are you going to do with the time that you've got left? And when it comes to dying, you'll have no choice. Whether you're prepared or not, you'll have no choice. The human body is incredibly fragile, very vulnerable to disease, to injury, to just a knock on the head, food poisoning, small bacteria, getting hit by a car, so many different ways to die. And this body is very vulnerable. All of your money and wealth can't protect you from death. All of that stuff that we go around busying ourselves in the world with, a good job, a nice house, precious things, a good status, none of this is going to help you when it comes to the end. Your friends and family will not be able to help you. They cannot take death away. No one can protect you from death. And in the end, your own body will not be able to save you. Your own body will just have to give in. Because that's the nature of bodies. They exist, coming into this world for a short time. They stay, they remain, changing, hopefully growing old, but they get sick, and then they die. What I've gone through just then is some of the teachings of Atisha, that Indian monk who had a huge influence on Tibetan tradition. But the Buddha himself, the Shakyamuni Buddha, Gautama the Buddha, he taught the 5 frequent reflections, which some of you will know. Do you know what they are, the 5 frequent reflections? I've taught many of you this in the past. Taught sickness, old age, death. So it's pretty heavy stuff, isn't it? Old age, sickness, death. It's kind of like the things that we should think about frequently, right? Separation, what I talked to you a little bit about before. Separation from things like your loved ones, your possessions, everything that is near and dear, beloved to you, you will be separated from. And the last one is karma, the law of karma, that your actions done with intention, whether good or bad, you will be the heir. You will live a future life supported by the actions that you do in this life. So this is that big picture Buddhist view of the true problem that we face. It's not just enough that in this life we will have old age, sickness, death, that we will be separated from our loved ones, our family, our friends, our possessions. It's not enough that we experience this once, just in this life, but over and over and over and over and over and over again. And this rebirth, constantly suffering, constantly undergoing these things over and over again, this is called samsara. Samsara, it's this endless cycle of wandering, this miserable cyclic existence of life, old age, sickness, death, over and over and over again. And the Buddha says that the amount of tears that we have shed for losing a mother or losing a father or losing a loved one, the amount of tears that we have shed in samsara is far greater than all of the water in the ocean. That the tears that we have shed when someone has died. And so this is a really heavy kind of view of this thing we call life. There is a lot of suffering in our life. There are a lot of tears. There's a lot of tragedies. There's a lot of pain and loss. And when someone dies, that's when we often feel it the most. This irrational, emotional, metaphysical, existential crisis. What is it all about? We're very fortunate to have these opportunities when someone passes, and you should use these opportunities when someone passes near you, because otherwise you're not going to think about it. We use these opportunities to really start to understand those big questions. And so although it's very sad when someone near us dies, although we cry, we use it to develop wisdom. Without that, our life may lack clarity, may lack meaning. So we use these opportunities to develop wisdom when someone around us passes. There's a sutta that I often teach, so forgive me if you've heard it before. It's the sutta about the thoroughbred, the horses, and a thing called a goad. Do you know what a goad is? G-O-A-D, goad. It's a long, pointy stick. It's got a sharp point, like a spear, and then it's got a little hook like that. And they use it to plunge it into an animal's neck, to like a horse or an elephant or an ox, cow, plunge it into their neck, just here, and the pain makes them move, right? So it's like an instrument of cruel training that they use. And the hook is a similar kind of hook them, make them go this way, right? Have you seen those before? Have you seen animal trainers doing that? Yeah, in some countries it's still used. So it's pretty horrible, right? At the time of the Buddha, this was quite common. So that's what a goad is. And they'd use a goad to make a horse move, okay? So this sutta that I'm sharing with you now is about developing the awareness of death. The awareness of death, the understanding of death. Already I've said to you, oh, it's great to have this awareness. And you're like, yes, Bhante, yes, Bhante. And already it's starting to fade, starting to disappear. And so the sutta goes, there's 4 types of people in this world who can be compared to horses. 4 types of people in this world who can be compared to horses. The first horse is a very quick learner. A very quick learner. When it sees the shadow of the goad, it thinks to itself, my master wants me to move. And so it moves. Smart horse, right? Just the shadow. This is that kind of training that happens over time, right? If you're smart, then you'll avoid some pain, right?
Selection.
Yeah, so if you're smart, you see the shadow and you think, I don't want any pain, and you go. And so the Buddha said that this is like a person, a smart person, a quick person, who, having heard that someone in the next village has died, they think, oh, death. And this urgency, this samvega, this spiritual urgency rises up within them because they're smart. They know that person that they heard about in the next village is just like me. If they can die, so can I. How am I living my life? What am I doing with myself? So it's a smart learner, smart horse, smart human. Second kind of horse is not as smart as the first horse, doesn't move when it sees the shadow of the goad, only moves when it feels the tickle in its hairs of that pointy tip. And then it thinks, right, I should move. That movement that's kind of, this is the samvega, the spiritual urgency which shakes us, makes us tremble, makes us active in our spiritual practice, propels us along the spiritual path. And so the Buddha said that this is like a person who didn't just hear about someone dying in the next village, but saw it with their own eyes. Takes a little bit more, right, for this person to get it. Has anyone here seen a dead body?
Yeah.
Yeah? Can I see a show of hands? So probably about a bit more than half, yeah? In some cultures, seeing a dead body is becoming rarer and more and more rare, more and more difficult. And I was in Thailand recently, last year actually, during a retreat, and a visiting monk there, who's from India, he died. And none of us were expecting it. I don't think he was expecting it, but he died, right? And they had a funeral. And I think in India, very often you'd see the dead body, and you could have this moment of appreciation of the change that has occurred. You see the pallor of the skin, that life is gone. You see that kind of waxy kind of quality, the deadness in the eyes, the lack of movement in the breathing, not there. So seeing a dead body is very good. And unfortunately, at this time, they put the body in a coffin, and the Indian devotees who were looking after the monk were really upset. They got really angry because they're like, how do I know it's him? How do I know? You know, how can we know that he's dead? Because they wanted to have that visceral understanding. Yes, he's gone. And they do say that, you know, when people see this, they start to appreciate this. It's a process of grieving. But when people don't see the dead body, some people say it's a bit harder for people to come to terms with it. Anyway, so this person that the Buddha was talking about, that second person, saw the dead body, and just like that horse that trembled when the goad went into its hairs, that person thinks, right, this could happen to me. What am I doing? Let's develop spiritual urgency. The third type of horse, not a smart horse, doesn't move when it sees the shadow, doesn't move when it feels the tickle in its hairs, only when it's plunged into its flesh. Only then does it think, right, I should move. Takes some pain, some suffering for it to get it, right? In the same way, the Buddha said, a person who doesn't just hear about someone dying in the next village, doesn't see a dead person, but sees a dead person who they know, sees someone they know. And only then does it occur to them, death. I should be moved by this. If you think about it, we're a little bit like this kind of person. We don't actually care, do we, about other people in faraway lands or people down the street we've never met. I mentioned that my friend had died. You didn't really care, did you? No, because we don't. Why don't we care? Because we're not attached to those people. They don't do anything for us. We're not invested in those strangers. We don't care about them. This says more about us than it does about the deceased, right? Our grief, our pain and suffering around death, this is about us. The dead people, they've gone. The grief, this is something that is borne by the living. Our care and concern for those who are dead is about our own attachment. I think this says a lot about us. But not judging you, not judging you, because we can't care about everyone in the world, can we? In the same way. You know, we can't spend our time grieving for every single person who dies. But it should affect us somehow. It should make us think. It should make us aware. We should not see it. We should allow it to affect us somehow, knowing that our life too is like this. So that's the third type of person, the third type of horse, required a little bit of suffering, a little bit of pain, just like that pain that we experience because of our attachment when our relatives and friends die. That's when we do have that opportunity to really learn about this topic. When a stranger dies, when someone we hear about dies over there, it doesn't affect us. And so when someone dear and near to us, as I said before, this is a useful opportunity for us if we allow ourselves to develop some wisdom. The last horse, last human, a very slow learner. This horse doesn't move when it sees the shadow. It doesn't move when it feels the prick in its hairs. It doesn't even move when it's pierced in its flesh. Only when that goad penetrates deep into the bone, only then does the horse move. A very slow learner, right? Takes a lot of pain for that horse to get it. And the human, also a slow learner, doesn't get that samvega, that spiritual urgency when they hear about someone dying, when they see a stranger, even when they see a loved one. Only when it's starting to happen to them, when they're sick, when they're dying, only then does it start to become real. Only then. And there's so many people in this world who, when they are dying, don't believe it is actually going to happen. Who fight, who go into denial, who refuse to accept, who think that somehow they, out of all the humans that have ever lived, out of all the animals that have ever lived, that somehow they will be the one to escape death. And this could be us. If we're not careful, this could be us. Someone who has developed no awareness of the certainty of death. Someone who has developed no acceptance of this certainty. Someone who has no insight into the processes of nature, that all beings born must die, that this is part of a natural process that we can't control. And someone who has developed no wisdom or any moral position on their own life. Someone who has lived carelessly without a thought about others or their own future results through karma. So if we're not careful, this could be us, this stupid horse, this foolish human. And so that's why we come and we do some death contemplation, to really put things into perspective, to make it real, to understand, to accept, to come to terms with, to make peace with the reality of death. So it's been pretty grim so far. Are you ready to do the meditation? Yeah? Do you need a few moments to wriggle or anything like that, like worms? Okay, have a little stretch. I don't usually allow this, but I'm feeling kind, believe it or not. So if you want to lie down with your head facing towards the Buddha image, you're welcome. Please don't lie with your feet pointing out towards the Buddha. If you want to stay in your chair, you can. So I also just want to say to any of you who are a bit nervous about doing the death contemplation, it is quite confronting. Just remember you're here surrounded by this wonderful community of friends. And if at any time you're feeling really uncomfortable, then you can just get up, walk downstairs, walk around the block a bit, come back when you're ready. So you don't have to endure. Or there's another room just through here if you want as well. If you just need to get some space, then that's okay. It's going to go for about 30 minutes. And the contemplation we're doing is from the Buddha. It's from you find it in the Satipatthana Sutta and the Mahasatipatthana Sutta in the contemplation on the body. And goes through 9 different stages of decomposition of a corpse. And so we visualize this decomposition. First of all, we don't visualize our own body just yet. Second of all, you don't want to visualize a loved one or someone who has died or anything like that. Just a regular old dead body, right? And so we get a lot out of this meditation, and it's a very powerful practice to do. So it's good to do once in a while. Doing it every day, perhaps for a period, but we need to balance this insight that we're developing with calm and peace. So we don't want to end up kind of neurotic. You don't end up like Bhante Akaliko running around saying, we're all going to die. You've got to be calm. You've got to get through your day. You've got to work with people. You've got to live your life. So we want to have this kind of calm urgency And I think as you do this meditation, you'll see that it's possible to develop this sense of calm and peace and acceptance whilst having a very sharp awareness of the truth that death is coming. We can't escape it. So let's take a comfortable position, something that works for you, something that allows you just to relax. We can even maybe make the lights a little bit softer in here, Carrie, if that's possible. That's perfect. Yeah. And so we're just going to spend a few moments settling into this contemplation. So just allow yourself to become calm, to become peaceful, and letting go everything that's going on outside in your life. Just let it go for the time being. Allow yourself to be here now. So just spend a few moments settling. And so now we'll begin our contemplation. These 9 cemetery contemplations taught by the Buddha. And to begin, we visualize in front of us, lying on the ground, a body. A body without life. Body without movement, without breath. Body that is dead. A corpse. It's lying there, maybe 1, 2, or 3 days old. That body is undergoing a process of change. Without breathing, gases have become stuck inside that body. The body becomes bloated, starting to swell. And without the heart beating, the blood that used to pump through the body has begun to pool, turning the skin a bluey purple color. And so you see in front of you clearly lying there, this body, a corpse, 1, 2, 3 days old, bloated and blue. And you think to yourself, my body is of the same nature. I have not gone beyond death. This is my inescapable fate. My body will become just like that. There's nothing I can do to stop it. There's just this process a natural process. This is what happens when a body dies. It becomes bloated and blue. And this process, this natural process, continues. Now this body becomes food for many beings. It's eaten by jackals, vultures, dogs, crows, eagles, by insects, flies, worms, maggots. This body becomes food for other beings. And it's natural that this happens. My body will become just like that, eaten by many beings. And it's okay. It's natural. This will be my inescapable fate. This process continues. Now the skin and the flesh having been ripped open, we start to see inside the body the things that are usually hidden. The animals eat the organs and flesh. We see the skeleton covered in little bits of flesh, covered in blood, held together by tendons. My body is just like that. A skeleton with flesh, blood, held together by tendons. And over time, the flesh gone, blood staining the bones. Over time, even that blood fades. And what remains is a skeleton held together by tendons. You see it. And you know, my body is just like that. My body will become just like that. This will be my fate. That body is like a puppet held together by strings, holding that human shape. But now, those tendons snap, decay, dissolve, and that human shape becomes fractured, the bones becoming scattered. Over here, a foot bone. Over there, a leg bone. Over here, a hip. Over there, a rib. Here's a jawbone. There, the skull. That body has become scattered, bones lying here and there, that human shape gone. And my body too will become just like that. This is my inescapable fate. And now you see those bones moved by wind and rain, piled up. They're bright and white, like a conch shell. But over time, those bones begin to decay, yellowing, becoming brown, becoming brittle. Its bones becoming decrepit. And you know that this too will be my fate. My bones will become yellowed and decayed, decrepit. And far, far into the future, many years from now, those bones will disintegrate until there's nothing left but a pile of dust. And this will be my fate. I have not gone beyond death. My body is of the same nature as that body. I cannot escape. I cannot escape death. This will be my fate. And so now reviewing this process of decay, that body lying there 1, 2, or 3 days old, bloated and blue. Eaten by animals, seeing flesh, blood on bones held together by tendons. The flesh disappearing, the bones stained with blood, held together by tendons. Blood fading, bones held together by tendons. Tendons decayed, the bones scattered. Bones piled up, white. Becoming yellowed and brown, decaying. disintegrating into dust. See this process, this natural process. Understand my body is just like that. This will be my fate. Contemplating in this way, ask yourself, understanding this certainty of death, how am I living my life? How am I living my life? As we come towards the end of this session, still with your eyes closed, let's just take a few moments to review. How was it to contemplate death? Was it challenging? Was it easy? Was it hard? Why? Was there something that stood out to you, that affected you? Why? And how do you feel now? And so you can relax your awareness, coming back to this room surrounded by our spiritual friends, safe. And when you're ready, gently opening your eyes. So, you're alive, right? What are you going to do about it? So that's the real question for you today. What are you going to do with this very precious life? So to finish up, I'm not sure, Kerry, did we get around to doing any photocopies? Okay, good. So Kerry has very kindly printed out a tombstone for you. And I'd like you to spend just a few moments now writing down on the tombstone your name, an age. I mean, let's just pick one, right? It could be 104, could be next year, could be this year. I don't think you're going to be tempting fate by writing down the age. You can leave it out if you wish. Think about how you might die. And one that I often suggest is when people are scared of some sort of dying, like cancer or car accident, to use that. It's useful to work with. And something perhaps that you hope people will remember you by. She was a kind person. He helped me a lot. He always smiled. Something about yourself that you wish people will remember about you when you're gone. And the reason I asked you to do this is because this helps us orient how we want to live our life. And so there's some texts and pens coming around with your patient. And so just use maybe all of those things that I suggested, or maybe even just one thing that matters to you. Even just putting your name on that tombstone for some people will be quite confronting. So if you want to add your age or not, do or don't. If you want to add a cause of death, do or don't, whatever. If you want to add a little bit that people should remember you by. And this is just for you, so we're not going to be sharing this. Just for you. Something to take home to your family to confuse them.
Put it on the fridge.
Put it on the fridge, why not? Just so you can remember, right?
So you can put our age now, or the age we want to live to.
Either, right? Any age. Yeah. Just something to make you think. Okay. Yeah. Could be this year, could be next year, could be 20 years from now. Of course, most people, whatever age they are, they always want a little bit longer. Finished? Yeah, I was going to get everyone to do the tombstone, but I think there's more people than tombstones. But yeah, if you want to take a tombstone home, more than welcome.
A lot of lying down next to it for a while.
Yes. Well, there are some, I think in Singapore or Malaysia, I saw there's a group that does this. They get people to lie in coffins. They do a quick death contemplation. Would you like to do that next time? Get a whole bunch of coffins delivered to the Buddhist library. Did you read about that woman, that poor woman that got buried almost? And then she kind of woke up during the wake. And then apparently she's died again. But I mean, gosh. Yeah, who wants to be buried alive? Anyone? No? Very appetizing, is it? And I would encourage you also, if on the way out, we're almost finished, but on the way out tonight, to have a look at the books that Kerry has carefully curated, some alliteration, for you on this theme of death. And you look around the library, if you're asking yourself, what am I doing with my life? Then there's so much wisdom here on the shelves of this library. Such a good opportunity to be able to come here, pick up a book, to immerse yourself in profound teachings that will change your life. So do take advantage of the library and all its knowledge. It only really becomes wisdom when you understand it for yourself. And so it's good to have access to these teachings so that you can make a lot of progress on the spiritual path. We need guidance. And some of the books actually that Kerry has put aside are really good, like the one by Bhikkhu Analio, about how we need compassion and love in the face of death. Does anyone want to share like their little, what they might want to be remembered by? Hopefully we can have like a positive takeaway from this. Anyone? No? No? Go on.
I brought joy into the world.
Ah, she brought joy into the world. See, if people would say that about anyone, that person's a very wonderful person to share joy in the world. Anyone else?
Dharma bro.
Dharma bro. Okay, yeah. Bara. Dharma bro. That's pretty cool.
I didn't actually put it as Bharat. I actually put it as Bharatanta. The end of Bharat.
Okay, the end, yes. Gone. See ya. Yeah, very good. Anyone else? Okay.
Something like this that happened.
Well, no one's forced to share. Just if you wanted to. Oh, is that what your tombstone says?
Yes.
I knew something. I knew something like this would.
Apparently Spike Milligan's tombstone said, I told
you, yeah. Yeah, there's some good ones out there. Okay, very good. So thank you very much to each and every one of you for coming along tonight and for taking this opportunity to confront a profound truth about what it means to be human and to sit with that and to allow it to transform your mind so that you have more wisdom around this topic and you can practice more acceptance and understanding of this process. So the Buddha said that death contemplation is very powerful for our practice. So do keep it in mind. Don't allow yourself to fall back into ignorance and delusion when it comes to death. Keep reminding yourself, I may not be here tomorrow. So how am I living my life? Very good.